Welcome to the new Natural Horse Talk Show. I'm your host, Lisa Ross Williams, publisher of Natural Horse Magazine. Every issue, I will be interviewing a couple of the writers, which allows us to go into more in-depth about a particular subject. Today, I'm really excited to be talking with Karen Pomeroy, founder of Equine Voices Rescue and Sanctuary in Amado, Arizona. Karen wrote the article, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the truth behind the Grand Canyon Havasupai Falls in our summer issue in Natural Horse Magazine. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for being with us today. I think this abuse of these equines is something that way more people need to know about.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm really grateful for the invitation.
Well, first, let's start. Can you just tell us a little bit about the Grand Canyon Havasupai Falls? I've never been there, so I don't really know a lot about it.
Well, the Havasupai Falls is just a beautiful place at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and people from all over the world come to Arizona to visit the Grand Canyon, but also, for their final destination to visit these incredible falls. They're just stunning. And one of the things that's happening is that it's tribal land, and that there are only three ways to actually get down the canyon, and that is either hiking by helicopter, which could be tricky because there's only one helicopter that flies back and forth, and the wait can be up to a few hours to actually get the ride on the helicopter. And then the third way would be by either horseback or on mule. And so that's sort of where this all is starting, I guess. And so those are the three choices for people to actually get down to the canyon and be able to either camp or stay in the lodges down there to also visit the falls.
Well, tell us really what goes on behind the scenes to these horses and mules that are used either for, taking people down or packing supplies up and down. Well, what has been happening, and this isn't in all cases, but in a good percentage of the animals that are being used in the situation. First of all, the animals are contracted out by different trekking companies that actually rent the animals for their clients. So that's one aspect of the situation where they book the animals, so then the animals can be used to actually take people down and supplies down. The problem that's happening, and it's been happening for years, and I just feel like there hasn't been enough awareness brought to the issue. It's a very complicated issue because it is tribal land, so the laws are a little bit different, but the horses are not they're used as machines, basically. They're not being well cared for. They are starved. They are made to go up and down the 8-mile stretch of the canyon, it's not flat terrain. It is switchbacks all the way up, and it's 8 miles. There's no water at the hilltop, and right now, I'm not sure what the temperature is there, but I know here where my sanctuary is, it's 105 degrees. So it's warm. It's cold in the winters. There's no water at the hilltop, so when the horses have to climb this 8-mile stretch, they don't have any relief. And then they're forced to go back down the mountain or back down the canyon. And they are forced to do this several times a day. There have been, and I've submitted photos and proof that many of the horses are not fed properly, so they're carrying people in packs on their backs, and they are malnutrition. A body conditioning score, which is a way that we can score animals, a 5 being average weight, a 1 being emaciated, a 10 being obese. Many of the horses are a 2, and they're carrying people, they're carrying packs, and many times it's not obvious because they have saddles on their backs or packs on their backs, and so it's not an obvious thing to actually witness or to see. But there have been many tourists that have witnessed the abuse, the horses falling on the canyon. A couple of years ago, there were a string of 6 or 7 horses that were tied together, and they fell over the cliff. So it's just atrocious. They're being beaten. I have a horse here named Samson that we took out of the canyon, I think about a year and a half to 2 years ago, who was beaten so badly by his owner that his owner left him blind, a broken nose, and he has a lameness in his leg now because of just the amount of work he had to endure.
In your article, you actually talked about 4 of the named horses, and Samson was one of them. And I want to definitely go into detail about each one of their stories so we can put more of a personal take on this so people really understand. So why don't you tell the story of the horses that you discussed in your article? So that would be Samson, Brownie, Elliot, and Twiggy. So can you share their stories with us?
Yeah, well, Samson is one horse that we actually have here at the sanctuary. The other 3 horses went to other rescue groups, one rescue group in Phoenix, Arizona. So the details are pretty. I don't have the firsthand information like I do with Samson, but I do have firsthand information because I work closely with Jen Broombaugh from Healing Hearts Refuge up in Phoenix. But Samson, as I mentioned, was beaten so badly by his owner that he was left blind. I mean, he is here now with 2 other blind horses that we have, but he was forced to actually hike and carry people and carry packs up the canyon 5 times a day. He has a knee that is completely calcified from an injury, and luckily the owner released him, and that's how we ended up with Samson, was with the owner release, with the owner's consent, basically, because he didn't want to take care of him anymore. We were told Samson was about 15 years old, but when he came here and I had the vet check him and give him a health check, he's estimating his age at 21 or 22 years old. So this was his life, his entire life, and he endured a tremendous amount of abuse. He is just now, after a year and a half or so, allowing us to brush him and pet him. He's very shy around his head, understandably, because that's where most of the abuse took place. So that's his story. The other horses, similar situation but different. Abuse used in the packing. One of the horses was tied for 10 days with his saddle on, that he developed such sores that maggots were actually breeding and living underneath the saddle in his flesh.
Oh.
And these are the kinds of things that are happening as we speak, and it's just not okay. And I think there are so many. I just think being on the show and being able to speak on their behalf is so critical, because the abuse really does have to end. It is just awful. So that's their story pretty much.
Well, I know that when that horse collapsed on the trail and somebody got pictures of the guy actually beating this horse to get him up, at least I did see some of that on Facebook. What do you know about that poor horse? I understand that he's still out there working.
Well, I believe, and the information's a little sketchy right now, and I'm trying to get more information on that situation, but that definitely happened. He was down, he was rented, and he was being kicked in the face while he was down because the owner was trying to get him up, and he was very, angry at the horse, and this was witnessed by tourists. And this is how a lot of these cases are being brought to the light, is people witnessing situations like this. My understanding is that the horse is in custody with the Bureau of Indian Affairs officer, and they may prosecute the person that was actually kicking him and beating him. But right now, I can't confirm that for sure. But I am hoping that that's the direction that this will take.
Well, if this is the bread and butter, the people who own these horses and the mules, if it's their bread and butter, I don't understand why they wouldn't be then taking care of these animals. I mean, do you understand the thought process?
Well, not really, because, I can't really put myself in someone else's shoes if I'm not in their shoes. I mean, that's just sort of my personal philosophy, and I don't want to make a judgment on their thought process, but there are definite issues down there with severe addiction to alcohol and drugs and things like that. So, and financially, I'm not sure. I don't know that these people really I'm sure they have the means to pay. I'm assuming they have the means to pay for at least basic care, food and water. But I don't, the funds are definitely not, in many situations, not, given to the horses for their care. And for me also, the other side of it is these trekking companies know that this is happening because they've been involved. And I think that they are as accountable as the actual individuals that are not taking care of the animals and abusing the animals. I think by participating in a situation like this, you're, in my opinion, an accessory,
Right.
And so there are different, I think there's different ways of looking at it and not necessarily placing blame, but coming up with different solutions to stop the abuse and to help these animals that are enduring this lifestyle.
Well, so who actually owns these animals? Are they individual tribal members, or who owns them?
Yes. They're owned by the tribal members and, the tribal community. They're not independently owned, and they're not owned by, the visitors per se, the tourists or the trekking companies. They're owned by the Havasupai Nation or the Supai, people that live in the village.
Mm. Okay, well, we're gonna take a short break for a quick commercial from one of our sponsors. But when we come back, I want to talk about some things like why isn't the Humane Society getting involved in this, or maybe they are and don't have. But we'll go into detail about that just in a short minute.
Horseplay has never been so much fun. These tough Equa Spirit balls come in lots of styles and 2 sizes. They're extra heavy duty and hold up to even the friskiest play and exciting ground exercises or mounted games. Stimulate your horse's mind, body, and spirit with an Equa Spirit ball. To order, visit equa-spirit-toys.com.
Okay, and we're back with the Natural Horse Talk Show. I'm talking with Karen Pomeroy, founder of Equine Voices Rescue and Sanctuary, and we're discussing the Grand Canyon Havasu Falls equines. So why isn't the Humane Society putting a stop to this abuse?
Well, the Humane Society is involved in the sense of in the first trip we were actually involved with that, and that's how we ended up. Well, we didn't end up removing Samson. We ended up removing Samson that weekend, but it wasn't due to the efforts of the Humane Society, or it was really due to the efforts of Susan Ash with SAVE, who has been extremely involved in and has a very good pulse on the situation down there. But we went down with the Humane Society and a couple of other rescue groups, some veterinarians, a farrier, and treated 34 equines. And it was really at the owner's discretion. It was the individuals that own the horses that wanted to step forward and allow us to trim the hooves, give the inoculations, basic vet checks, teeth floating, things like that. There has since been a second trip down there. We were not involved because I feel that we all need to do I guess we're doing our part in helping, but I feel like that there's so much more that can be done, like basic things like getting water at the top of the hilltop, which I understand has just happened just recently within the last week or two, which is a great progress, and it's a great step in the right direction. The problem that I see is that the horses that are the ones that are severely needing the treatments because they're so severely either starved or abused or whatever are not necessarily the ones that are being treated. And I'm not sure how we can solve that problem, but I do feel that at least the Humane Society and, the 2 trips that the groups got together and went down and, the vets and everything that were involved, at least something was done for sure. But I just feel that there's just so much more, but it is so complicated because it's tribal lands and the laws are different, and it's just a little harder to prosecute, and it's just a whole different world.
What about the Bureau? Well, what about the Bureau of Indian Affairs? I would assume, this is kind of, if people are seeing this happening, that it's kind of, it's kind of negative. What are they doing? You think that they'd want to step up and help with these animals? So what is their role, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, in all of this?
Well, their role is to enforce humane treatment of the animals. That's one of their roles, and they do have a holding facility down in the canyon at the Havasupai, in this area, and they are confiscating equines that are being abused, I think to an extent. And there have been situations where there has, been prosecutable offenses. And so they are, I think, doing what they can do, and I think they're definitely part of the solution. It's just that I think it's also, educating, which I was going to say is that educating the people down there to change the way that they look at how they're using and treating these animals is going to be a process, because when you're used to doing something a certain way, sometimes changing that mindset, raising that awareness, raising that consciousness, understanding that these horses are not a tractor, they're not machines, they are sentient beings that have feelings and spirituality to them, and I think that's as important as actually vetting them and trimming their feet and that sort of thing. And I think when it's time to change mindsets, it takes time. And I think that's one thing that I think the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they're more of the law enforcement down there, but it's also, I think, by going down there with the Humane Society, 2 times, hopefully that's the step in the right direction of starting to achieve that.
Right.
If that answers the question.
It did. And, in your article, you give contact information for a variety of, the BIA special agent in charge. You also give the contact info for Abby Fink, who's the tribe's PR person, as well as 2 of the trekking companies who are, contracting out with these animals. And, folks, go ahead and get a piece of paper and a pen ready, because at the end of this interview, there is going to be the contact information. So get a pencil and a piece of paper ready. But so if people were to witness abuse, neglect, the starvation, or the horses tied for days without food or water, then that contact is actually going to be the BIA special agent in charge. But you also list 3 rescues, one of which is yours. The other 2 rescues that are involved in this and have some of these animals. Tell us a little bit about them.
So Healing Hearts, it's an animal refuge, and they have 3 of the horses. They've pulled 3 out of the canyon, and I'm further away from the canyon. I'm quite a distance from where everything is happening, and she's closer. She's in Phoenix, and outside of Flagstaff is where the Grand Canyon is, and I think about 6-7 hours away. But she is a very reputable. Her organization is extremely reputable. She will do anything for these animals. I work with her closely in regards to many different cases, not just the Havasupai situation. And I believe she has 3 horses out of the canyon. And so that's Healing Hearts. I just call it Healing Hearts for short. And then I believe the third one that you're referring to is SAVE, Stop Animal Violence. And
so and I think they do a lot of educational stuff on their website, don't they?
They do. They are a really, really, really good resource when it comes to the Havasupai situation. Susan Ash has made this a mission of hers to bring this to light. She's actually gotten PETA involved, which I'm hoping is going to be the forerunner in making this change, because PETA is pretty active in animal abuse cases, and they've sent out 2 messages so far on their newsletters, talking about the situation, which this is a really big deal, which is incredible, because the more people that are aware of what is happening, the more we can make a difference for these animals. So Susan Ash with SAVE is a really good resource. She's not a 501c3 nonprofit organization. She does not have a rescue like Equine Voices or Healing Hearts. However, her main mission is to bring awareness to the Havasupai situation. So she is up on all the facts. She is the one, she's very active on Facebook. After this horse collapsed and was, kicked in the face, she posted it on Facebook, and it received over 2 million hits from people all around the world. So she's a wonderful resource for people that want to know more about what's happening.
Well, I think, it boils down to as well money. And if people are refusing, like using these trekking companies and refusing, to use those services, I think that's going to make a big impact. I think that you would think that these trekking companies would say, wow, let's bring some hay in. Let's do some stuff because it's going to help their business in the long run. What are your thoughts on that? And have you talked to... Oh, go ahead.
Well, I completely agree with you. I think just like anything, it's kind of basic economics, supply and demand. If there's a demand for using the animals to either pack supplies and when you look at these photos of them packing these supplies, it's hundreds of pounds on their backs, hundreds of pounds. And, if we make a stance and say, we're not saying don't, use the animals, but this is what we'd like to see happen. Give them water. Only have them trek up in the canyon once, 3 times a week or something like that. No, don't overuse and abuse to the point that these horses can't function. And I think if there is a demand, the supply is going to be there. And I think if people continue to use the animals in this capacity, and the trekking companies continue to make money in this, because of using the animals, it's going to continue. I think if we stop using them and stop the demand, then the change will happen. It's inevitable. It will happen. And
right.
That's really my platform. And I think that's what I thought was amazing, that Susan received 2 million hits from people all over the world that said, I will never, ever ride one of those horses down the canyon ever again. I will hike, or I will wait for 2 hours for the helicopter, And so the impact is monumental, and I think that's really where the change is going to happen.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And you said that there's the 2 large companies. One is Wildland Trekking, and the other one is Arizona Outback Adventures. And again, at the end of this interview, I do have their contact information listed. So any of you listeners, take some action, step up, let them know your thoughts on this, because again, that's what's going to make the changes. So, well, in closing, Karen, we covered quite a bit, but what final words do you want to share about this issue with our listeners?
Well, I'd like to echo your sentiments exactly. Please don't put your head in the sand and be an ostrich. A simple phone call, a simple letter to the editor in Flagstaff, a simple letter to the trekking companies, please cease. This is what we will not support this. We will spread the word. I think the more they hear from the public, they're going to eventually have to start paying attention to this. And I think that's one way to do it. I think financially, if anybody would like to support the cause, we're a nonprofit. Healing Hearts is a nonprofit. The funds will go to not only removing more of the equines out of the canyon, but also hopefully getting hay down there, supporting, just really helping the animals. So that's one way people can help. Or just contacting us directly, or contacting Susan Ash and supporting her in her efforts. We're all doing this together, but we all have different things that we can bring to the table. So, but I do think having your voice be heard is the most important thing right now, because we need to come together for these animals. And those are sort of my parting words. I'm echoing exactly sort of your sentiments as well.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you being with us. But before we close, you have an amazing rescue down there. We fully support you and can't wait to come down and visit, actually. We need to get down there. But tell us just a little bit about Equine Voices, how long you've been in business, why you decided to start the rescue.
Well, thanks, Lisa. Thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate the support. And you and Kenny have been just incredible supporters to us over the years. And just in a nutshell, I began the organization in 2004 by rescuing 4 babies that were 11 months old from the Premarin industry, which is the pregnant mare's urine. And for those of you that don't know about the drug, you can go on my website and learn about it. And we're doing a big campaign with physicians and things like that this year as far as getting the word out there about Premarin and what the drug does and where it comes from. And then because the industry's changed a little bit, even though that is near and dear to my heart and it is still our mission, we've opened up our gates to all equines, basically, that have been abused, abandoned, starved. We have rescued dozens of horses that have been used in the illegal drug trade because we're 30 minutes from the border of Mexico, and drug trafficking is a real issue here. And now we're involved with and wild horses as well. And now we're involved with the Havasupai situation, and also a situation that's happening on the Navajo reservation with hundreds of horses that are starving because of the drought. So we've been operating for 14 years. We've saved over 1,000 horses. And if people would like more information about Equine Voices, certainly feel free to go on my website and learn more about us.
Equinevoices.org, correct?
Correct, equinevoices.org.
Yeah, definitely, listeners, check them out. They're doing a great job down there. Karen, wow, with the Premarin stuff, actually maybe that's another interview we need to do here in another month or so. Because that's,
I would love it. Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll definitely plan that because, again, that's another thing that women don't realize. They're on these hormone drugs, and, not only is it a horrible industry for the animals, it's also a horrible drug for the women. So we'll definitely plan that.
Wonderful.
All right, everybody. Well, that is it for today's Natural Horse Talk Show. I'm your host, Lisa Ross Williams. Natural Horse Magazine is a quarterly journal of holistic equine care. So to learn more about what we do, which is educate people about a more natural and holistic way of caring for your horses, visit www.naturalhorse.com. Thank you so much for being with us today.